So our next item is an update regarding federal funding for the Area Agency on Aging, and I do have an advocacy letter that I will read so the public is aware of what it says, and I'll hand it out to you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
Yes.
if I may, just for clarification, that would be item 6.10.
Yes, I'll go ahead and state that item. To clarify, that's 6.10, 110 item, consideration of presentation regarding 2025 federal funding for the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino counties. Thank
Well, I
you.
handed out all my copies. No, I didn't. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, in summary, before I just jump to reading the letter, this is prior to the federal funding freeze back in December, when the continuing resolution for the federal budget was passed. It neglected to include the Older Americans Act, which funds the Area Agency on Aging. And so since December, we have been attempting to figure out how to make the Area Agency on Aging work without that funding, pending the March 15th deadline for the continuing resolution to expire. On March 15th, either the federal government will pass the new budget or continue the resolution. Hopefully they do one of the two. In the meantime, we're facing a shortfall of nearly $1 million. We have spoken with CDA, the California Department of Aging, and they have helped us identify state funding that can be used to continue the services, but that is not a great solution because that funding is usually handed to the senior centers to be used in more flexible ways. And instead, if we use it to continue the existing programs, they don't get that additional funding later, as well as if we use that state funding and federal funding is later approved, we can't use the federal funding to backfill. It's double dipping essentially. So if we touch the state stuff and then later federal is approved, we could only use it going forward. There's also a contracting process that would need to occur with our senior centers that will be lengthy and potentially delay payments to them. So we're waiting until the very last minute to decide if we have to go for the state funding in hopes that it resolves prior to that. But if not, we have notified the senior centers of what's going on, so they're aware. And just for your knowledge, the programs that the AAA funds include the Senior Center Meals Program, which includes Meals on Wheels. That is one of the most visible programs. Alzheimer's daycare, information and assistance, legal services, family caregiver support, Tai Chi, and also provides our long-term care ombudsman. In Lake County, we served over 221,271 meals in 2024, responded to 26,410 information and assistance calls in 2024. In Lake County, 18% of our adults live in poverty, and this also represents Mendocino County, Area Agency on Aging. So in Mendocino County, 17% of adults over 60 live in poverty, both exceed the state and national average. So that is why we are bringing to you for consideration a letter to encourage our representatives to engage in advocacy, and we're also bringing this before the Mendocino Board of Supervisors. So it reads, urgent call to action, reauthorize the Older Americans Act, OAA, return federal funding to the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino County, AAA, to prevent irreparable harm to seniors. To Congressman Mike Thompson, Congressman Jared Huff, Senator Alex Padilla, and Senator Adam B. Schiff. We, name of entity, are writing to request immediate reauthorization of the Older Americans Act and the return of federal funding to the Area Agency on Aging of Lake and Mendocino counties. The suspension of these funds will cause irreparable damage to the most vulnerable seniors in our community living on fixed incomes, many of whom are veterans. Our seniors will be forced to make the hard choice between eating and living expenses without reauthorization of these funds. The federal continuing resolution passed on December 20th, 2024 did not include OAA reauthorization. Lake and Mendocino counties face a nearly $1 million shortfall to continue these services from January 1st through June 30th. Vital AAA services at risk. And then I recap the services that I just told you about. And then I recap the stats that I just told you about. If you would like to include any specific examples, testimony from seniors, there's space there. We urge you to act now to protect your senior constituents, reauthorize the Older Americans Act, and include funding for the Area Agency on Aging. We shared this letter also with senior centers and anyone else who is potentially interested in engaging in advocacy. Anything to add, Lisa?
One thing to be aware of is if the Older Americans Act is not reauthorized. I'm Lisa Faracco, Program Manager for the Area Agency on Aging, for those of you who may not know me. If the Older Americans Act is not reauthorized, about 60% of our budget is federally funded. So moving forward, we will only have state funds to distribute to our senior centers. It will be a big impact on our budget. And some of our programs are strictly federal funding. They don't receive state funding at all. And that is the information and assistance, the Alzheimer's daycare, legal services, which is heavily utilized, family caregiver support, and Tai Chi. So your advocacy is appreciated.
Thank you. Supervisor Pyska?
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, Sam. Yeah, we've had several conversations with this, about this with AAA. It's very disheartening. So many of our seniors rely on these services. Lisa mentioned the legal services. We have seniors under attack for fraud right now. And, you know, the calls that people are getting, the baiting, the phishing, like all those scams that are impacting our seniors, we have legal services provided. And that's a lifeline to them when they have questions, if they're not sure if something's real or not, or if they're being taken advantage of. This is a really vulnerable population. And I don't think you mentioned your staff time is also covered by this.
Yes, our administrative staff time is also covered by this. None of my staff need to be worried about losing their job. I have plenty other things to do at social services, but yes, there would be less staff to dedicate to the services to our seniors, including long-term care ombudsman. She has managed to recruit several volunteers, which is wonderful, but she does a lot of work herself that would be at risk.
Yeah. So it's really important. We have higher levels of senior population, or our senior population is higher than so many other counties. I think we're at 26%, 27%.
I quoted the in poverty, not the total amount who are considered aged, but
Right, but the senior centers are also a place where people gather and they get that social interaction. They get out of their homes. So there's a lot here that we really need to support our seniors. I have had a conversation with Congressman Thompson and Luca about this. So the next step is for all of us to be advocating with these support letters, and the Mendocino board should probably follow suit too.
And if I might add, the Meals on Wheels program is the only social interaction that many of our seniors get. We had a situation at one of the senior centers recently where their Meals on Wheels driver noticed that the person didn't come to the door. So they called the senior center contacted them. The person had fallen in their home and could not get to the door. And so they were able to send help to help that person because that Meals on Wheels worker had been out there and the contact wasn't made.
Yeah. And a lot of those drivers are volunteers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Supervisor Owen?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with this being so important, how did it get missed and not put on the request in December?
it was part of the original federal continuing resolution, and it's part of what was cut in the final deal that was made.
Prior to December?
Back in December. So we're talking the federal budget process, and instead of agreeing on a budget, they agreed to a continuing resolution. The original proposed continuing resolution did include this. Many things were cut out of that before both parties agreed to a final continuing resolution, and this is part of what they left out.
Oh, dang.
I don't know why.
Okay,
I couldn't begin to guess.
okay.
It's not a good outcome.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Not a good situation, and don't even know what the answer is if nothing changes at the federal level. And to be honest, I'm not expecting much to change, as I'm hearing the minority party is looking to change their position and try to block new budgets in order to stop the things that have been happening currently, which means we're involved in a game where it has real impacts here for our seniors, and that really sucks. But I guess my main point for this is you have a letter here, you're asking for us to advocate. I'm not sure that we can approve a letter today with the way the agenda is written. Are you asking us to do this on our own? Does this need to come back next week so that we can still get it in front of them by March? I just want to kind of check in and make sure what do we want from here today and what can be done today.
If I may, Supervisor Batier, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. If one option for your board is to direct staff to come back with a finalized letter of support, because I do see some highlighted portions here that may need to be substantively filled out for your board's consideration if that is what staff is recommending as far as an actual letter of support that would come from the county, signed by the chair, to go out to these recipients or addressees.
Okay, I can totally do that. We're coming before the Board of Supervisors in Mendocino in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So my concern with that, is that fit the timeline of, see, this is pretty important. We don't have a meeting next week. So our meeting after that would be another week out, so,
It's the same day as the Mendo Board of Supes. They chose to put it on consent agenda,
okay.
so I don't know that it will take up much time. They said I could speak during the 3-minute public comment.
Which we could do the same on the following, after the last week of February.
Okay?
And the other, in looking at the recommended action, it seems like we can just have consensus to make sure that we're advocating with our lobbyists on this issue. Is that,
Well, we did talk with the lobbyists about this and during the governance meeting, and they are tracking it, and we did reference this as it's under one of the priorities, sort of as a
So it's already
sub-priority. So they're
sufficient.
working on it. I think we just bring the letter back and we can put it on consent for next time.
Sounds good?
so, yes, go ahead, Supervisor.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I know we talked about it, but I didn't have the, it's under Protecting County Administered Safety Net Programs. So it definitely is already within the confines.
Yeah, but we specifically talked about it, and Rachel did a presentation, if you remember.
So then we have consensus to bring it back for our next meeting on consent, I think, to finalize the letter or approve the letter.
Sounds
Yes?
good.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Now, I haven't opened public comment yet. I believe we're done with supervisor comments. And is there anybody in the chambers who would wish to speak on this item? Not seeing any. Johanna, do we have any in Zoom? Okay. No hands? So I'm going to go ahead and close public, hang on.
There's a hand.
Then Betsy Kahn, go ahead and speak, Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say that I understand that every one of you deeply appreciates the reality that all this is about. I don't doubt your awareness and concern for 1 minute. I do want to say, for the sake of informing the public and making sure that this is clearly understood, the existing services, the ones that were already in place before this cut, are so meager. The waiting list to get that legal services is so long. Getting activism on the part of a disabled assistance programs, you can wait 2 years. These are meager programs to begin with. I would urge you all, in addition to just lobbying and that sort of thing, to really take up the subject of the situation for the 20,000 older adults in this county, according to the World Census, accessed online yesterday. 20,000 adults in Lake County, of which this 27% are the what you consider to be the population, but so many of those are living not just at the federal poverty line, but within the nearest range of eligibility for food stamps, for example. We really have a serious problem here, and thank you for letting me advocate to you on behalf of everyone of our age group.
Thank you, Betsy. Are there any other hands, Johanna? There's no other public comment. I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to the board, or which I believe we already have consensus.
Consensus, yeah.
So there's, what's that? You have, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your.
No worries. I just wanted to kind of check in. I know there's a AAA board. If things go awry for March 15th and things keep going as is, and you're telling us that we can figure out how to handle things through June 30th.
Yes.
Is it going to go through the AAA board as far as what the need is and what the ask is, and then it comes to the Board of Supervisors? At what point do we engage? Because obviously the AAA board is going to be with their hands out, not being able to find money in the couch,
We're
basically.
funded with state funds through June 30th, and the board has already discussed the plan to put that in motion, what the strategy should be. So we're good through June 30th, and then who knows what'll happen July 1st, depending on state and federal funding. You want to speak to that more?
So CDA has let us know that they're approving invoices, California Department of Aging, on a month-by-month basis, depending on which area agencies on aging have requested prioritization. We have requested and are receiving prioritization for funding. Once we hit the March deadline, if there's not further federal funding forthcoming, we'll switch to the state funding buckets that we can utilize for this, the area plan contracts that we have in place. So the senior centers, through the contractors, will receive the funding they are expecting to receive through June. After June, when we would do our new area plan contracts, that's when we will see the real impact if we don't have federal funding available. At that point, we will engage with our governing board prior to that point. Our governing board to ask their recommendation, and then depending on what our governing board decides for us, we will approach the counties with whatever the ask may be at that point.
There is a contracting process with shifting from the federal to state funds as well that you may hear of from the senior centers, because it will potentially delay the handing out of.
Yeah, so the senior centers, they operate on a reimbursement basis with the Area Agency on Aging. They receive their contracts, so they have a set amount they're expecting to receive for the year. They provide us with their invoices and their backup, and then we're paying December now and this month. So if there is a delay, which we expect there may be in March, when they submit those March invoices, they may be up to 2 months delayed outside of the normal process while we execute new contracts to use the state funding. So you may hear from your constituents that funding is delayed, and it will be a hardship for the senior centers who do not have a lot of other funding sources.
And then there's also the May revision of the governor's budget will be an important one to better understand how that will have an effect. So, thank you.
But we do have to pay for the ombudsman no matter what.
Supervisor Owen?
Do we know approximately what they run per month? The senior centers, their budget, what do they normally collectively throughout the county?
We don't provide all of the funding. We're a single funding source. We're not the only funding source for the senior centers, so I can't speak to their total budgets. The Area Agency on Aging Area Plan funding, which is just one of our funding cycles that we have, is approximately 1.8 million for the 2024 fiscal year for Lake and Mendocino counties. And
Okay.
about 60% of that is federal funding.
Okay.
Didn't when we asked about meals per month, if we could figure out just a way to cover the meals, wasn't it $80,000 or $90,000 a month?
Yes, if we're just covering meals, so that will leave those programs that are strictly federal funded with no funding at all if you're only covering meals. Yes, it was about somewhere between $80,000 or $90,000 to cover just the meal portions of the area plan contracts that we currently have in place.
Per month.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have consensus on that item. Thank you.
Thank you.